Welcome to Constitution Week 7. So, we are learning the Constitution together. And now this week will be so much shorter and easier than last week. So, last week we had the meaning, the essence with the three branches of government. And now these are more the nitty gritty details in Articles 4 through 7. So, they're much quicker. All right, so let us just jump right in with Article 4. So, Article 4, Section 1, and you can read the actual Constitution itself in the notes. But the Section 1 says that the full faith and credit shall be given to each state about the other states. In other words, each state has to respect the laws and judgments of the other states. So they can't say, hey, Florida, we don't like Georgia's laws, so Georgia, you have to change your laws. They have to have respect for each other. That's pretty easy. All right, Section 2 says the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. This is called the Privileges and Immunities Clause. Doesn't that sound fancy? There's always like a name for things, the Privileges and Immunities Clause. It means that the citizen of one state, if they are in another state, will enjoy the same rights and privileges as the residents of that state, except in the areas of voting and eligibility for running for office and things like that. So there are a few limitations. But basically, if I moved to a different state, I wouldn't have to earn my right to get the same privileges as other residents of that state. Okay, and then also in that section, a person who is charged in any state with treason, felony, or another crime, if they flee from justice and are found in another state, they shall, on demand of the executive of that state, be from where he fled, must be delivered up and removed back to the state that he was charged in. This is called the extradition clause. So if a person commits a crime and is charged for that crime in Delaware and he goes to Maryland and is caught in Maryland, he is extradited back to Delaware, and that is right there in the Constitution. Section 3 says that new states may be admitted to the union. Isn't that nice? Yes. And that Congress will be the one who does the admitting. So, and that is just the way it is. So, Congress has a lot of different responsibilities. And one of their responsibilities is admitting states. So, when states have met requirements for being part of the union, they can apply, but Congress will decide whether to admit them or not. So, if you can remember your history, Maine was the first state that was admitted as a state after the Continental Congress, after the Constitutional Congress, and that was in 1791. So the first new state was in 1791, and the most recent state that was admitted it was 1959. And can you remember who that was? That was Hawaii. Okay. All right. And then also in Article 4, Section 3, it says that Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting territories and other property belonging to the United States. And so this is called the Plenary Clause. It gives Congress the power to oversee the U.S. territories and properties. So that is all that is. All right, then Section 4 of Article 4 says that the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government and shall protect each of those states from invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive of that state against domestic violence. So, in other words, this is called the guarantee clause, and it says that each state will have a Republican form of government. In other words, they'll have representatives, they have a state legislature, elected officials. Okay, two is that the federal government will help protect states individually if they were invaded by a foreign power. And then third, if there's an internal resurrection or rebellion where things are dangerous, the state government, the governor or the legislature can request help from the federal government. And I can remember that kind of thing happening way back during the civil rights movements and all the protest against the Vietnam War. So when I was young, I'm telling my age here. So I was a child, and I remember watching the news, and the students at colleges would start protesting, and the governors wouldn't like it, so they would ask the president to activate the National Guard, and so we had messy situations in those days. All right, that is all of Article 4. That didn't take long, did it? All right, so Article 5 talks about how to make amendments. And so that's that, like absolutely, because they knew that they were getting the framework of the Constitution so they could get the nation up and running, this new nation, this Republican constitutional form of government that no one had ever had before. So they needed to get it up and running so the country would survive. But they also knew that it would need to grow and change as the nation grew and changed. And so as they knew more and had more time to work on things. And so they came up with the way to amend the Constitution, to add on to it. All right, so what they said, and rather than read all the clunky verbiage, Article 5 is going to give you the procedures for proposing and ratifying amendments. So, since the Constitution was created and went into effect, there have only been 33 constitutional amendments that made it out of Congress, and only 27 of those were ratified by the states and are now part of the Constitution. And of course, we know the first 10 are the Bill of Rights. And so we will talk about each of these amendments in following lessons. So the way amendments come about is there's two methods. The second method has only been used once, and that was in repealing the Prohibition Amendment. So that's Amendment 18. So the major way that you propose and make an amendment is that both the House and the Senate have to agree and propose an amendment by two-thirds of the members present. So they've got to be in agreement, two-thirds of the members being okay with it. That's so that, like I said, this has only been used so far. Then the other way is to call for a convention proposing an amendment upon two-thirds of the state legislators requesting that a convention. So that would be, generated by the states itself, and this has just not been really used. And then to ratify the amendments to the Constitution, Congress says so the Constitution says that the Congress will say which of these ways to ratify it. So Congress will say, hey, okay, we're sending this to the states. If the states want to take this up, this is how it's going to happen. All right. So first, they could do it this way. If the Congress says do it this way, that 3/4 of the state legislatures have to ratify that amendment to the Constitution. Um, or Congress could say that 3/4 of the states have conventions to ratify that proposed amendment. And like I was trying to say earlier, is that was repealing the 18th Amendment of Prohibition and replacing it with the 21st Amendment that undid Prohibition. All right, so um, what we see is that it is not easy to amend the Constitution, and that is supposed to be that way. It is supposed to be a stable document that is not subject to the whims of whatever is hip right now. All right. So that is all. All of Article 5 is just about amending the Constitution. Article 6 is a short one, and so the first clause says that all debts that the United States had uh, gotten hold of during the War for Independence would be paid off. So it's like a promissory note. We are going to make this happen. Part of the Constitution, the fabric of our being, is we pay our debts. That's the way that goes. Okay. All right. Then the most important paragraph in the whole Constitution is the Supremacy Clause. And it says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all the treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, and anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. In other words, the Constitution is the primary law. It's the supreme law of the land, along with other federal laws and treaties. So if there are state laws that disagree with the federal laws, they are subject to being changed. All right. But anytime somebody says, oh, I'm tired of the Constitution, I think I'll ignore that. The Constitution says, no, this is the supreme law of the land. Remember, this is our social contract between the government and we, the people. And the Supremacy Clause is what keeps us safe from anyone like an executive who decides to make himself a dictator. He can't, because in our checks and balances and the balances of power, the Constitution holds all three branches of the government, and thus, and branch four, us, we the people, all in balance. All right. So everybody is subject to that Supremacy Clause. All righty. All right. Then the next part of Article 6 is the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the state legislatures, all judges in the United States and the states shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. All right, so the president, when we did Articles 1, 2, and 3, the president is the only one that had a verbatim, like he had to say the statement that was written out in the Constitution in order to become the president. That's his oath of office. All the other senators, representatives, people serving the states, and all judges, all of them have to have an oath or affirmation in to support the Constitution. Like they have to promise to support the Constitution. That's their oath. That is a promise. They're binding themselves to the contract. All right, so they must support that. And that the actual wording is not prescribed in the Constitution. It's just that they have to do that. Interestingly, they added that there's no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. So there, from day one, we had freedom of religion kind of woven in there even before it was clarified in the Bill of Rights, that you could not be forced into a state religion in order to be an elected official or a judge or serve your country in some way. So that is really cool that all the way back then they were thinking about freedom, and we would not have a one state church. All right, now let's talk about Article 7. All right, and all Article 7 is just the rules. You have to, if you're going to have a contract, you have to ratify the contract. You have to sign the contract. If people don't sign the contract, it doesn't go in effect. for a country to have their contract go into effect, you got enough of the people signing it in order for it to ratify, to become the law of the land. So Article 7 says the ratification of the conventions of the 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this constitution between the states, so ratifying the same. In other words, 9 of the 13 states needed to sign this constitution, ratify it, so that it could go into effect. And if you remember, those of us who live around the Delaware area, we are very proud of the fact that Delaware was the first state to sign the Constitution. Um, and it did that on December 7th, 1787. And even on the license plates on cars, it says Delaware's the first state. So we're very proud of, Delaware is small. We need something to be proud of. All right. And then immediately after Delaware, Pennsylvania and New Jersey squeezed in there during December of 1787. Next came Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina, and New Hampshire by June of 1788. So, in half a year after the first 3 states all ratified it. And at that point, the Constitution became the law of the land. But very quickly after that, Georgia, New York, and North Carolina, and last of all, Rhode Island ratified the Constitution. So Rhode Island held out until May 29th of 1790, but it got that signed. So that then is the story of the articles. And then starting next week, we will look at the amendments, which shows our steadiness as a constitution and a constitutional republic, but also the ability and willingness to grow and to fulfill our own destiny.